You have to be really intentional about putting a team together.
I was in!
Crawled out of the pound and started screaming.
How good is Joey Bosa?
Herbert, rolling, looking, throwing, end zone, touchdown! It's intercepted. Derwin James. Derwin was there.
You got to be on a mission every day in the NFL. But even more than that, you got to be on a mission together.
Great hands, Keenan Allen.
The Los Angeles Chargers select Rashawn Slater.
Asante Samuel Jr.
Stop! Oh, I'm stopping y'all boys. That's what I'm saying.
Intercepted. Picked up by Michael Davis.
Explosion, explosiveness from Eckler.
There's Murphy. Boy, he blew that up, didn't he?
It is picked off. Nasir Adderley. 50-50 ball is 100%. Mike Williams.
Ochena, Nwosu, and that will end it.
Time to bolt up.
Welcome to another episode of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. Today's show, of course, being brought to you by UFC Fit Temecula, Brewery X, Charger Bolt Family, and Manscaped. Make sure to use the promo code LAFB20 to get 20% off your next purchase. Go to manscaped.com for more details. If you are joining us live on Twitter, welcome. It is a big, also confusing type of a final cut down day, I guess we would call it, Dan.
Yep. That's a good way of putting it.
A few surprises that maybe we weren't expecting come final cut down day.
Woo! That came quick. Yes, you are right. Excited for this episode. It has been a long time coming. We finally know the 53-man row. It's that kind of day, my friend. We know the 53-man roster, or at least as it stands right now. Granted, things can change. For those who are coming in for the first time, thank you so much. As you can tell, Jake is loving the current state of this team, having a great day himself. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach us on the comments in whatever way you're watching, whether it's on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube.
Somebody make it make sense.
And we will do our best to try to bring some knowledge, bring some perspective, and bring some answers to some of the questions and comments you have. So, Jake, Chargers know of their 53-man roster as of, again, today. Make it make sense, please.
Exactly. So, wow, where do you start? Obviously, the biggest head scratcher of them all this afternoon comes with.
Wait to get out of this.
Friend of the show, we just had him on just a couple weeks ago. Tyron Johnson, Billy, was very unfortunately, unceremoniously waived by the team today. And the Chargers ended up, as of now, only going with 5 wide receivers on your roster. That means your wide receiver core, as it stands right now, is Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Josh Palmer, Jalen Guyton, and KJ Hill. Dan, you and I, for the longest time, were assuming that they would at least keep 6. For the longest time, we assumed that before training camp got underway that KJ Hill was going to be the odd man out. We thought Joe Reed was going to emerge as we thought he was going to be that gadget type player. Definitely thought he was going to be implemented more in this Brandon Staley, Joe Lombardi offense than he was under the Anthony Lynn regime. That did not come to pass as he was barely even seen during training camp. He was also let go this afternoon. But Tyron Johnson, for a guy who was one of your fastest receivers on this roster, definitely had deep threat ability, proved that last year. I just don't understand this. This is one that legitimately has me questioning Brandon Staley and Tom Telesco for this move. I would hope that there is a incoming move to bring someone back on this squad at the wide receiver position. I have no idea who that is. I've been scouring all of the cuts that have been made, and there's not a lot of names that really jump off that would, fill that type of need as far as what Tyron Johnson brought to this team. But on top of that, Dan, if you go back to the interview that we had with him a couple weeks ago, the camaraderie that he talked about between he and Justin Herbert that they had built up last year, you would have thought that would have carried so much weight for this team. And we saw early Tyron Johnson looking like he hadn't missed a beat in the offseason. He was already making a bunch of plays in the early days of training camp. And now there's, I'm not sure if it's so much of a story or that we're just trying to connect the dots as to try to find the reasons as why Tyron Johnson was cut today. I know a lot of people have been talking about, the scuffle that he got into during the San Francisco joint practice. I just can't buy that. I can't buy that because if you're going to tell me that, training camp fights happen all the time. We even saw it happen. The Raiders and Rams practice, for crying out loud, had to get cut early because there was too many fights going on. But if you're going to tell me that that's the reason why Tyron Johnson's cut, then please explain to me what giving up 2 sacks and 2 false starts on this last preseason game against Seattle is worth. I just don't know. So, Dan, the floor is yours. I will just sit back and enjoy it.
Oh, boy. This is going to take a lot to unpack. Obviously, I think the biggest surprise of all of the news today was T. Billy and Tyron Johnson. And in short, I agree with you. But we're going to get into all kinds of stuff. So I think we're going to start off the top with probably the things that surprised us or annoyed us, and then we'll kind of just go down and go through kind of the rosters as we go in and sprinkle in comments and questions as they come up, as they pertain to the topics we have. So I guess since we haven't really had a chance to shout out any of the folks that have come in, shout out to Vic Z, shout out to Blue Deftone is here, shout out to Bihando, Robert Carter, Gary Davidson, Jason Brainberg, Pacific Beats. We've got a ton of people in here. Not very many are happy about this Tyron Johnson stuff. Okay, so you mentioned it. I think all of us are curious about what happened with Tyron Johnson. Even as of this afternoon, when Brandon Staley was asked about Tyron Johnson, he didn't really give much. He said he just didn't kind of fit what the team was looking to do. He kind of didn't talk about anything else. So you kind of start wondering, is it because of the fight? Is it because of the scuffle they had in practice? Is it because of maybe an attitude thing? Is it a culture thing? Like, you don't know. But what I thought I knew was he was arguably the 3rd best receiver on this team, especially 3rd best route runner on this team, and was by far, at least I thought, a top 4 wide receiver on this team. Now, is there someone else that the team's looking for? Don't know. Surprised that we only have 5 wide receivers, which we'll get to in a bit. Even as late as the Donald Parham interview that we had, he was talking about how much juice T. Billy brings to the squad. And so I don't know why this happened, in short. I think the one thing, we talked about his route running a bit. We talked about kind of how last year he wasn't utilized nearly as much as he could have been. We thought that may have been going a little up this year. But in reality, Jake, he wasn't used that often last year in this scheme. Now, it's a whole new scheme, whole new team. I get it. But I think he only had like 20-something catches. And so, yes, Jalen Guyton had a ton more options or opportunities to make catches, but he dropped more. So, to be honest, it's a lot of question marks. That's a weird one. And I think that both Tom Telesco and Staley and Lombardi, this was probably a joint decision. And I think this also speaks to how deep this wide receiving class was, or receiving core was. I mean, we're not even talking about Jason Moore, who was cut. We're not even talking about Joe Reed, who was cut. Like, Bandy was cut. But there's a bunch of guys that I bet you this team would love to have on the practice squad. But, Jake, do you think T. Billy is going to make it back to the practice squad? Like, no way, right? Like, okay, percentage chance he makes it back.
I'll say a 10% chance he makes it back. And I think that's even generous.
What's up, Jason Rosenberg? Put yourself in Brandon Staley's shoes. Okay? We've heard everyone speculating about why. If it was you and you cut Tyron Johnson looking at this core, why would you do it? Like, put yourself in, give us your Brandon Staley impression or hat. Like, what could that reason possibly be?
I just don't know. I don't know. I really can't figure it out. Again, Dan, we predicted that 6 wide receivers were going to make this roster. 6. Now, I know that what we say has no merit on what the Chargers actually do. Tyron Johnson did not make the final 53 last year. He was on the practice squad. He got beat out by Jason Moore and then ended up coming on with the team. I believe it was in week 2. So I don't know. I just thought of everything that had been built as far as the rapport between him and Justin Herbert up until this point. He explained it during our interview with him, what he provided for the team as far as a deep threat, as far as a speed asset to this offense, what he was able to do with the small sample size of targets that he got was still impressive. Again, forget the final numbers, 3 touchdowns. What was it, Dan? 400 yards. But look at what he did in the amount of targets for it. That's the really impressive part. So I still just can't put my finger on it. Honestly, I can't. Now, is it going to severely impact your wide receivers? It may. But the reason that this is so big of an issue is that you look at Keenan Allen, you look at Joshua Palmer, but then you look at Mike Williams. And you look at Mike Williams, and I hate to say this, but just unfortunately from the standpoint that can you guarantee that Mike Williams is going to play a healthy 16-game season? So that would bring Jalen Guyton. That would elevate him. Jalen Guyton got a lot of opportunities just like Tyron Johnson did. And can they do similar things? Yes, but I don't fully believe that they're the same type of wide receiver. Jalen Guyton, I think, ended up having more targets than Tyron Johnson last year, but he also dropped a lot of passes too in last year's games. So he's now is going to have to very much step up. Now, KJ Hill, he's another anomaly in this. So special team standpoint.
I think you're bringing it up. I think this is probably, if there was a reason that I can give Brandon Staley as to why this happened, well, and we've had a few people talk about it in the comments here. I think it might be that he does not provide special teams.
Well, if that is the question, Dan, then please explain to me, unless it was something more serious that we didn't know about, why was Austin Prohl cut? If we're talking about special teams abilities and someone who we thought watching practice took out Joe Reed from his job on any of the return duties, explain to me why Austin Prohl was cut.
We still haven't heard, and people said injury. We still haven't heard anything about the injury. And if he was injured, can someone please share?
Right. So if we're going to make that argument, I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know about that. I can't fully get on the train of saying that it was strictly a special teams issue as to why Tyron Johnson was cut. I can't fully believe that yet.
Craig says it best. Craig Smith, of all the hills out there to die on, the Chargers pick a KJ. Hell.
Craig always has the nice way to word subtle jabs in there. It's brilliant.
Thank you so much, Craig. I needed that. Okay, so we have a ton of other topics to get to. We'll continue going through, and we'll talk about probably some of these Tyron Johnson comments as we get through. In short, I think we can all agree there were some attitude issues that may have been the cause of this. He has not helped on special teams, and we know how important versatility matters. Someone pointed out in one of the comments, how we do it matters. We heard Coach Staley quote that and slap his hands together as he's talking about it, and that may allude to a little bit in this. But look, anyone who sits here and tells you I had T. Billy off my 53-man roster, they're probably lying. So, Jake, let's go into... All right, so Tyron Johnson was probably your biggest surprise. Arguably one that I think had the most... there's probably two. But probably the one that had the most curiosity was, who is going to kick the ball for this team?
Go on.
Coming week one. And it's kind of interesting because everyone was calling for a new kicker up until like 3 minutes after the announcement went out. And then everyone went immediately to, great, Michael Badgley's going to become an all-star, all-pro kicker as soon as he leaves. Wonderful. Can't wait. Because that's just like the Chargers' luck, of course. But Tristan Viscayno, I believe it's 4 syllables, Tristan Viscayno won the kicking job. Brandon Staley talked about it being because of the leg talent he has, both in field goals as well as kickoffs. He talked about him being young and just starting his career and being able to kind of mold that talent into something. We have a new kicker. And I think it is important to kind of take a second, take a moment. Like, being a kicker is hard, man. And let's just temper the expectations, temper the mood when Viscayno does miss a kick. Like, it's going to happen. But, Jake, did you think that was actually going to happen?
Watching Saturday's game was so weird, thinking about the kicking situation, because we knew it was coming down to the final preseason game, because it was Viscayno's show against the Rams, that it was Michael Badgley's show against the 49ers. And there were very finite times where the kicker got the opportunity to prove it. So literally it was either one or the other for these 2 preseason games. Then it came down to the final game. And even Staley said, we're hoping to have both of these guys kick. You would hope that they would have ample opportunities to get a number of different opportunities, but because of the Chargers' ineptitude to move the ball up and down the field and get shut up by the Seattle Seahawks, that didn't end up coming to pass. So the one opportunity that was given was Tristan Viscayno, and he misses. And there was speculation going out all over the place. Did Tristan Viscayno just blow his opportunity to be the starting kicker of this job? Like, you almost thought that Michael Badgley was going to win the kicking job by default.
De facto. Yep.
By default. Now, this is like a teacher telling you, hey, you need at least a 50% to pass. I just got a 47 and I still passed. I still passed my class. I failed, baby. And I still won. Like I said, dude, with the kicking situation, Dan, it's good that you basically just warn. No, we don't know what it is yet. But it's good that you at least warm everybody up to the notion that when the time comes when Viscayno misses a kick, it's going to. I think regardless of who the kicker was going to be for this year, as soon as that first kick goes wide left, wide right, the first extra points missed, who knows? You know that it's going to be vicious from the Charger faithful. That's for sure.
Yeah. Shout out to friend of the show, Brian. I think we pronounced Viscayno's name incorrectly. It's supposed to be Sly.
That's who Brian wants, and it is not a bad suggestion.
It's not. Robert Carper thinks that the deeper kickoffs won Viscayno the job, and I don't think he's wrong. That's at least part of the reason why he won.
100%.
Jorge is trying to tell me that it's Viscayno. It's Italian.
Man, it's a good thing that you don't pronounce his name on a weekly basis, especially like that.
Rest in peace to the Chargers' Nate Kading. Good in the regular season, just cut him before the playoffs. Low floor, he agrees. IB Hondo, low floor to make it as kicker on this team. 47%. We're going. They're putting such an emphasis on special teams. T-Billy and Money Batter both cut for special teams excuses. So that brings up an interesting point, Jake. There's a theme, and we'll get into the position by position groups here in a sec. One of the trends that I've noticed is if you're on the bottom whatever 10 of the roster and you cannot perform on special teams and contribute, like it's going to be a hard damn time to make this team. Period. And I think you saw that in some of the roster cuts. Like T. Billy is a damn good wide receiver, but he's also, in I guess their opinion, wide receiver 5/6. And if they have two wide receiver 5/6, one guy could do special teams, one guy can't. Like he got cut. You look at, I mean, there's some other guys we're going to talk to. You have to do special teams well. And also other folks are kept here. Gabe Neighbors, for example. Brandon Staley talked about and raved about how happy he was with how much of, I forget the word he used, but how happy he was as a leader of the special teams unit. Neyman, special teams unit. Like a lot of these guys, like that's where they make their money. That's how they're going to stay on this team. So those are probably the two, I think, biggest. I know we're going to get to the offensive line here in a bit, but people are going to talk about how the hell did some people stay and some people are here. But again, if you think about how this roster was created, look at no further than the quarterback situation. That's at least why one guy is no longer on this team. So, Jake, let's go by position, and we'll look at who the starting folks are on this team. And then we'll go into some reasons they were cut. So, Justin Herbert, Easton Stick, and your boy from New Orleans.
My boy.
Chase Daniel. I'm calling him your boy. All three are here. We heard people talk about it forever that there might be one that's cut, but they ended up keeping them. And I think they might keep one because of all of the fluidity of COVID and whether someone goes down, injury, who knows? There's a bunch of stuff that could go wrong. So they kept three. So we can kind of breeze over wide receiver. I think we know why they kept three. They all kind of bring a different skill set. I think Chase Daniel brings the leadership, brings the history in the Lombardi offense and just football in general. I think Easton Stick has the mobility, and they clearly see something out of him. Fullback. We have a fullback on the team. Did you think there was any chance Gabe Neighbors was cut?
No, I felt like he was going to make the roster. Some people speculated the fact that if you were to keep Steven Anderson, especially the way that they were using him in this last week's game, more of like an H-back, that would have given him more flexibility to make this team. And lo and behold, Steven Anderson did end up making this team, which is great. But no, I never thought that there would be any chance that Gabe Neighbors would be cut. I always thought that he was going to end up making the final 53.
All right. Now going to running back. This is where things start to get interesting. So, running back, Austin Eckler, Joshua Kelly, Justin Jackson, and Larry Roundtree are your remaining running backs. Bradwell was unfortunately cut today. Of those four names that stayed, any you disagree with?
You know, I'll call myself out on this right now, and I have no shame in doing it just based off of what I saw. Again, while it was around early that I would have taken him last year when he was drafted, at the time when I was looking at our running back scenario, I really liked the Josh Kelly pick. I still even said that the fourth round it was probably a round too high than what I would have drafted him. I would have rather had him in the fifth round. But, you know, he went through a lot of struggles last year in Anthony Lynn's offense, fumbled a bunch after starting off really hot the first couple of games, and definitely lost confidence as a runner. And I was hoping to see some dramatic improvement of that, especially behind a revamped offensive line. There were times in practice, Dan, especially during the first couple weeks of training camp, where we felt that even the reports and what you were witnessing in training camp, Larry Roundtree and Joshua Kelly were neck and neck. And then the first preseason game happened. And Larry Roundtree took that ball and ran with it in dramatic fashion and made a statement. And I was still thinking to myself that, okay, these next 2 preseason games against San Francisco, against Seattle, the running back situation was still going to be fluid. And I said that just from the standpoint of that I felt like this organization, again, what they had invested in Joshua Kelly, I think that they liked the dynamic that he brought to the team. I thought it was still going to be a fluid situation, that they were going to try to mix him in, which they did. But when you compare the reps that were actually done, especially this past week in a game where this offensive line was just getting decimated, once again, Larry Roundtree proved to be the better option at running back. And Joshua Kelly was not getting any production in the running game whatsoever. So, yes, it surprises me a little bit that they ended up keeping 4, especially when we're talking about guys over Tyron Johnson. If it was me right now, who would I be keeping? Joshua Kelly or Tyron Johnson? To me, that is no contest. So, yes, if we're to talk about that, did I think that there was a possibility that they could have kept 4? Sure, in some realm I did, but that was also with Tyron Johnson making the final 53. So it's a little bit perplexing when you look at certain players that are no longer on this roster and which ones are, given the fact of how they performed over not just in the preseason these last 3 weeks, but over the entirety of the last year and a half that we've had them on this roster. So yeah, I was a bit surprised in that circumstance.
Yes, and for folks who just came in, we just went over the fullback position. Don't worry, we know Steven Anderson has been balling out at fullback as well, which is what I'm going to get into when we get to the 4 tight ends that have been kept on this team. Lots of people have questions about this running back group, Jake. So Robert Carper asks, should we have waived Justin Jackson? Now, we all know about the history with injuries, but we get all that. If it was you, would you have waived Justin Jackson?
I'll say this. If he is proven to be healthy as of right now, then I would say no. But the biggest reason, however, if I was coaching this team, would I have waived him? So you take your chances on possibly bringing in another veteran running back. Okay, the Chargers have dabbled in that last year when they went on the free agency market. But no, I would not have gone into week 1 with Austin Ekeler. As much as I love what I've seen from Larry Roundtree, as a coach, I still would have wanted more of a veteran presence at the running back position ahead of a 6th-round rookie this year, a 4th-round draft pick last year that still hasn't produced what you wanted to see. I wouldn't have felt entirely good about that type of depth. Do I think that Larry Roundtree, from what we've seen in a small sample size, is going to grow into something special? Yes, I do. I think the flashes that he's put up thus far have been very impressive. But for me as a coach, from a depth standpoint, I get the health factor. And I get why people say that it doesn't make sense, because now what you're doing is you're simply just waiting for when that's going to take place. It's a tough decision. It really is. But to me, if I'm a coach, I would have wanted more of a veteran presence. And if I was to go into week 1 with Austin Ekeler, Larry Roundtree, and Joshua Kelly on my roster, I wouldn't feel the best about that. I wouldn't. People will probably disagree with me, and that's completely fine. And if you're higher on Roundtree, more power to you, and that's totally fine to do. I hope you're right. I hope we're both right on that circumstance. I would love to see Roundtree one day possibly take over that RB2 spot, especially considering the fact that Justin Jackson's in a contract year. But knowing Staley being his first time as a head coach, I can understand why he didn't pull that trigger.
The one thing that I do want to remind folks about when it comes to this running back group, we've got a lot of folks are Roundtree fans, by the way.
But hey, rightfully so. Rightfully so.
The dudes look good.
Absolutely.
But it is really hard to assess this running back squad and their performance during preseason with how bad the reserve offensive line has looked. Like, you go back and watch some of the film, like, yes, Joshua Kelly, whatever, 2 yards of carry, stuck behind the line of scrimmage. But like all of them were. Like Roundtree had a couple great runs, but like sealed off really well. Didn't shake anybody. He just went around the edge, got 25 yards or whatever it was. There was no run blocking given to this running back group at all. And so as much as we want to get on Joshua Kelly, as much as we want to get on Roundtree and Bradwell and Gabe Neighbors and Eckler, we didn't really see much, but whenever we did see him in training camp, he looked great. Like, we can get on Justin Jackson for being healthy, sure. But we haven't seen much of this running back group behind the starting offensive line. Like, give me Joshua Kelly and Roundtree and Eckler and Jackson behind the guys that we actually have starting. I will take that. We literally have not gotten to see that in a game. And again, for good reason. We understand what this coaching staff and what they're trying to do with keeping people healthy for now. But I know people are down. I've heard people down on Joshua Kelly specifically. Like, it's hard. It's hard when your offensive line is getting blown up. I'll leave it there. Anything else on the running back?
Pull up TSK's comment real quick. I just want to clarify so that there was no misconception on what I was saying. So when I was saying the one incident, I'm talking about the one incident that we're all waiting for it to happen. If everybody keeps saying that the rap on Justin Jackson is that he is injury prone, then what we're waiting for is that very thing to happen. So it's a risk nonetheless. I get it. Do I fully 100% agree with it? No. I would have gone a different way. I really would have. But I understand the logic in it. Don't agree with it, but I understand it.
Yep. Thunderbolt 24 thinks everything's going to be fine because we're probably going to get... Why can't I pull this up? Where'd it go? Was it deleted? There we go. It sounds like he thinks that Tyron Johnson is going to be back. Everything will be fine. Again, what was your percentage chance you gave it that Tyron Johnson clears waivers?
I put it at 10%, and even now still saying that I think that even that is gratuitous.
Yep. I don't think it's happening, unfortunately.
There's 31 other teams that could use the speed of Tyron Johnson. I would be shocked if he makes it through waivers. And even so, even if he makes it through waivers, what percentage chance do you think that the Chargers are going to sign him back? We can't guarantee that. We have no idea about that.
Nope. I'm taking a quick picture because, man, we're getting some heated comments in here. I like this. I'm going to put this on Twitter so you can get all happy about this. Okay, so
people are frustrated, man. This is one of those days where you're in their, everybody's in their feelings, and deservingly so. Let's vent about it.
Yep. Look, and Edward has a question. Wouldn't it have been better move to have cut Pipkins and Kelly? So we'll talk about the offensive line in a sec. Do you think the team should have cut Kelly?
Given what was displayed in the preseason.
Yeah.
Again, if you're to take a simple metric, Dan, Tyron Johnson or Joshua Kelly?
Yes.
There's no question marks there. Now, did I see a scenario where all four running backs could have made this roster? Yes, but I also had Tyron Johnson making the roster in that situation as well.
He needs to stick it on.
Yeah, now I have exactly. There's another one that you could use. Given what I saw in the preseason, I thought it was clear. If anything, right now, moving forward into this season, if Roundtree has not solidified the running back 3 spot, actually has a very good chance, depending on what possibly happens with Justin Jackson 100%. In the next several weeks, that he could be thrown right into RB2. But if he has not solidified himself as RB3 on this team as of this day right now, I'm just confused.
Yes.
I'm just confused.
Yep. And TSK was referring, and I think he may have come in a little late, but he's referring to the incident with Tyron Johnson, with him having the thing with the scuffle with the Niners. And we talked about this. We don't have to get back into it, but we talked about it. It's not just that. We think that it could potentially
it has to be more than that. It has to be more than that.
Yeah, so we think it could be that he doesn't provide on special teams, could be a culture thing, could be a fit thing. There's a bunch of stuff there. No, we agree. It's not just that one incident. So let's get into an interesting discussion, which is tight end, before we get to the offensive line. Did you see a world in which we kept 4 tight ends on this team?
This is the world that I actually wanted to see. I wanted to see 4 tight ends on this squad.
Jared Cook, Donald Parham, Trey McKitty, Steven Anderson.
Good Lord. I can't wait to see what the 2 tight end set in the red zone looks like with Jared Cook and Donald Parham in real games that matter. I cannot wait to see this actually get executed. Brandon Staley and Joe Lombardi are going to have a field day with red zone options with these 2. Obviously, with McKitty, high draft pick this year, you're going to keep him on the roster. Steven Anderson has proven to be a very underrated, and showed a little bit of it last year, a very underrated receiver for this team. Good blocking capability, obviously has versatility. We saw that for what he was doing in the halfback situation. I just think that he is a great asset to this team. And I was pounding the table for him to make this roster, since we took Trey McKitty and when you were looking at the tight end room way early during our positional breakdown, there was a case that could be made of why he shouldn't be on the roster. But I think for what a different dynamic that he can add to this team, and some people are probably saying, what are you talking about, dude? You're talking about right now a guy who could be, tight end 4, whatever you want to say. I still think just what he can add to this team is a valuable asset from a receiving standpoint, from a blocking standpoint, and obviously a versatility standpoint.
So Thunderbolts wants me to spread a rumor about T. Billy, that he's a terrible human being, and that's why. Well, I don't know what bath mouth means. I was like using bath mouth versus bad mouth. I know
bad mouth.
I like bath mouth. No, I'm not going to, unless no. I think what Thunderbolts 24 is telling us is do it, so that way nobody wants him, and then we can bring him back.
Okay.
And if that is the reason, I hope that no other team gets him.
So Thunderbolts is playing.
I see what he's doing. He's playing chess.
He's playing the game of shit talking chess in order to keep Tyron Johnson away from any other team and have him come back to ours. I see what he's going for.
Yep. Okay, so one thing I will say, Steven Anderson, we saw a lot from him in terms of fullback. And we saw some blocking from him that I did not see in years past. I think Trey McKitty and Steven Anderson are going to battle for a spot later on, because four tight ends is a lot, especially when you have 4 running backs and only 5 wide receivers. Mm-hmm. That's tough. Ross says he's a rookie. You can't cut 3rd-round picks. I mean,
there's one in particular that you could have cut, but you didn't.
We're so close. We're so close to doing it. We're so close to talking about it. But look, I think Brian brings up a good point. Backup tight end and fullback, I was thinking the same thing. And if there was a reason why Gabe Neighbors got cut, which of course he didn't, because we all know now how important he is to special teams. But Steven Anderson would have been the reason why he got cut if he did. Now he didn't, but Steven Anderson made a great role for himself as kind of that linchpin to be able to do both. All right, Jake. All right, guys, we are rounding up. We're about to hit defense, but we are about to get into, I think, something that's going to bring in some feels. Offensive line, Jake, the offensive line for this Los Angeles Chargers: Corey Linsley, Brian Balaga, Matt Filer, Ode Ibushi, Rashawn Slater, Brendan Hymas, Scott Questenberry, Storm Norton, and your friend, we're all of our friends, Mr. Trey Pipkins, is on this Chargers 53-man roster. And all of Chargers fans rejoiced. Everyone was so excited to see Trey Pipkins back on the 53-man roster. Weren't we? I'd say so. Should we just move on? Move to the next one?
I think I can. My talk about Trey Pipkins and not to continue to beat a dead horse here.
Oh, Jake! I can tell Jake is literally trying to like compose himself. I can see it.
Look, the only aspect of why I can come up with a good reason as far as why Trey Pipkins is still on this roster is because the investment that was made to him from Tom Telesco on this team, and as Brandon Staley said today, offensive line depth. Now, again, this 53-man roster as of today is not officially the final 53. A bunch of things can still change in the coming days.
Very true.
But there has been nothing that has moved the needle since Trey Pipkins was drafted. Unfortunately, the cherry on top was this past game against the Seahawks. You do 2 false starts, you give up 2 sacks. It was just dreadful. Not to say that the rest of the offensive line didn't perform admirably, because they didn't, but that was one that really stood out. And for a guy that you invested a high draft pick in, you would hope that the development at this point in time, I don't care if it's from 2 different coaching regimes, you would just hope that he would be getting somewhat better. And I fortunately, I just don't see it. And I've said it plenty of times on Twitter that unfortunately the Trey Pipkins experiment, in my opinion, has failed.
And for folks who are giving you crap for saying that, what would you say?
If it hasn't failed, then explain. Yeah.
I didn't mean you. I meant for the folks who are saying, Jake, why could you say the experiments failed as if you know anything about football? Like, okay, fine. It didn't fail. What would you say happened?
I would say, so you're going to tell me that he's
great.
He's been respectfully moderate. I mean, what do you want me to say? I'm trying to say it in the nicest way possible.
I'm going to put that on a shirt.
Respectfully mediocre? Moderate? Come on.
Better than the worst on the worst teams.
That's all I have to say in regards to it, Dan. You could talk for a few minutes.
Okay. Look, I think all of us are a little concerned or questioning both Storm Norton and Trey Pipkins on this group. I think all of us know why we want the rest of them. Brandon Hymas actually has looked very good. I'm very excited to see what he's bringing.
Hymas has looked really impressive thus far.
And I think it was Matt Money Smith who said he wouldn't be surprised if he ended up starting this season sometime at guard.
If he does not start this year, then he's guaranteed to start next year at either guard position. I could definitely see it happening. His versatility is fantastic from a depth standpoint on this team. I'm really impressed to see what he's going to develop into.
Yep. So, again, the one thing I will preface, and I wanted to try to calm down folks a little bit earlier, which I don't know if it worked, but this is not the final 53-man roster. This is the 53-man roster as of today. Now, we're going to see a lot of things happening around the league these next 24, 48 hours. And so when I heard them talk about Storm Norton and they talked about Trey Pipkins, I think it was Staley today at the press conference after practice. They're depth pieces. He talked much more highly about Storm Norton than he did about Trey Pipkins. Trey Pipkins, they said that they've seen a lot of good tape, but they also seen a lot of bad tape. I don't know where all the great tape is, but we'll see. Those guys are definitely on the bubble. Like, if there are some folks that come in that are brought in from other teams, we've all heard everybody talk about the names of folks that are wanting to come in that were released. Like, they would probably be the ones that be on the chopping block. Would you agree?
I would think that they would have to be at the top of the bubble, yes. And context to that, I know everybody's thrown out the name Tyrell Crosby for a number of different reasons. Not just because of the camaraderie that they had during Justin Herbert's collegiate career, but I had a friend who actually is a big Detroit Lions fan. and immediately texts me yesterday and says, hey, just P.S., you don't want Tyrell Crosby on your team. He wasn't really that good. To which I responded from him, I said, it can't get any worse than what we already have, so I'll take my chances.
I think we found the answer.
As a backup offensive tackle, it can't get any worse. So, yes, I will take my chances.
Apparently, the reason why Trey Pipkins is still on this team is because he knows the nuclear launch codes. Otherwise, he's probably cut, right? Is that it?
I don't know about that.
We saw some folks talk about Brian Bulaga without him being a waste or whatever. Like, look, when healthy, and we heard Bulaga talk about it in the past, like what he went through last year was very new to him, and the lower back stuff kind of screwed him up in a lot of ways. He's healthy now. A healthy Bulaga is a very good offensive line. So let's see how things go this year. I know we were kind of burned a little bit last year, but let's just chill on that. I did not think that there would be a world where Trey Pipkins was kept and T. Billy was gone. I'll tell you that much.
Like I said, Dan, I'm not saying anything else. I've said my piece in regards to the Trey Pipkins. The book is now officially closed.
Okay.
Until next year. Next year.
Until 2021? Like week 1 or 2022?
If he's still with this team in 2021, the book will be, in 2022, the book will be reopened, but time will tell on that.
Now, one of the more fun stories, and this is actually very gratifying, and I love that this actually happened. Your defensive line currently, Justin Jones, Linval Joseph, Jerry Tillery, Kristen Covington, and your man, Mr. Forrest Merrill, the wrecking ball, are on the 53-man roster.
Bowling Ball 66 was my nickname for Forrest Merrill. I initially said it was a long shot for him to make the roster, and he did what he had to do to make this roster, and I was very happy that they ended up keeping him. However, one surprise at the defensive line that I will say, because Dan, I did say during our defensive line breakdown that this is a position that depth-wise still concerns me. So if you were to tell me that Forrest Merrill made the roster, that's great. Without even looking at the final cuts. If I was to say, okay, Forrest Merrill made the roster, tell me who the rest of the defensive linemen are. I thought at least one of Brennan Fehoko or Cortez Broughton still would be on this roster. I did not expect both of them to be let go. That was a surprise to me as it relates to the defensive line goes. I thought Brennan Fehoko, especially in practice, and I believe it was during the Rams game, showed a lot of good promise, a lot of growth from year one that he had. Cortez Broughton is a different type of defensive lineman for this team, but even he was making flashes as far as rushing the passers go during the preseason games. So again, if Forrest Merrill was to make this team, I knew one of those two were going to have to go, but I didn't expect both of them to go. So the Chargers are only rolling with, as it stands right now, 5 interior defensive linemen. Did you see what Alex Collins did in the game against Seattle? Woof. I like the starters, but I got to tell you, the depth behind it, having only 5 defensive linemen, concerns me just a little bit.
I will say this. Brandon Daly talked about one of the biggest reasons why they kept Forrest Merrill and why they got rid of Cortez Broughton was the size of the inside that Merrill brings. And Cortez Broughton didn't necessarily have that as much. And I get that part. And again, in this new scheme, there's a different need at defensive tackle than in years past. So that's what they said was the reason why. Whether or not that's actually true or whether or not we see it on Sundays, I'm not sure. He's only nose tackle that I wanted. Forrest Merrill? I'm assuming that's what he's talking about. TSK asked a question. What do you guys think about the kickers? We already talked about the kickers up at the top. I guess in short, Jake, did we think that they made the right decision? I'm gonna say yes.
I don't know.
Would you? No, I'm asking. But if it was you, would you have rather them kept Viscayno or Badgley?
Well, don't ask me. Anybody who followed my betting advice, I was taking Alex Kissman in the preliminaries, so nobody should even listen to what I'm saying as far as the kicking situation goes. Again, I did predict it was going to come down to the last game for these guys to prove themselves. But it's such a weird situation that the one opportunity that we get to get points on the board against Seattle, Viscayno walks out there, misses a kick. Michael Badgley gets 0 opportunities, and somehow Tristan ends up still winning the job. I don't know. It's the weirdest kicking situation I have ever seen take place. People could argue otherwise, but in a 4-week span over training camp practices and preseason games, yes, you talk about a damn up and down. Who's got the lead? I have no idea. It's changing on a weekly or daily basis. It was just bizarre. So I don't know if they made the right decision. Time will tell on that.
Blue Deftone has a question. I think Jerry Tillery will be better this year under Brandon Staley, but do you guys think Linval will stay with the team? I heard that another player is going to help him get a new contract. Now, a party wants to just punt that question until 2022, but I think in short, I do think Jerry Tillery is going to be better. I do think that this coaching staff has given him the luxury of being like a veteran stud playmaker without us really seeing that. Now, maybe they have. I mean, he hasn't played much because they've given him the days off, saying he's given them all they need to know in practice. Linval Joseph, I don't know. I don't even know what he looks like in this scheme. So I can't really tell you if I want him back in 2022. But Jake, do you have any thoughts on Linval Joseph coming back?
If Linval Joseph, and we said this during our defensive breakdown, he had one of the more underrated seasons of any player on this roster in 2020. And again, not gaudy numbers, nothing that's going to blow your hair back, but again, from the defensive perspective, what he did that kind of flew under the radar, it was very productive for him. Mm-hmm. If you could tell me that he could replicate that this season, then yes, I could say that there's a legitimate chance that you could possibly bring him back on a 1-year contract. But let's not forget, he's going to be 33 in October. 33. Mm-hmm. Chargers have gone down this road before. Look at Brandon Mebane, the aging defensive tackles, guys who used to dominate their position, and then at one point, it just unfortunately isn't there anymore. Now, I'm not going to say that Linval Joseph's there by any means, but I don't know. Like you said, Dan, it's probably a question that you'd want to see play out for him for 2021 if it ends up coming to that, because he signed a 2-year contract back in 2020 when he signed on as a free agent. His contract's up at the end of this coming season, same as Justin Jones. So your interior defensive line position is definitely going to be a focal point of something that the Chargers are going to have to address, whether it's from the NFL draft with a high pick or from a high priority free agent, depending on who comes available. I really like Linval Joseph. Don't get me wrong. I love the guy's tenacity, the way that he plays. He's deceptively quick for a guy that is his size. And the leadership that he brings to that interior defensive line is exactly what it needs, especially with young guys like Justin Jones and Jerry Tillery from a development standpoint. But signing another long-term contract, I'm not so sure. Maybe depending on this year, you can bring him back for one additional year. I still think it's too early to tell on that.
Cali Born 73. I wonder how many more times we're going to hear about this one. Yes, we know. We talked about it ad nauseum already. Tyron Johnson, we're all wondering why he was let go. Great question. But I don't know if Jackson needs to go too. That's a topic for a different day. We also talked about that already too. Jorge Rodriguez loves what Linval Joseph brings. Big guy has no quit, consistently chasing down running backs. Love that guy's effort. And yes, that's another comment in here about maybe why Cortez Broughton was no longer kept and staying with Wahoko. I do think it is purely because of size. Like, Merrill is a big man, and that guy is a wrecking ball. Would you call him bowling ball 66?
I call him bowling ball 66. Again, he reminds me a lot of Poona Ford. If you look up Poona Ford, who currently plays for Seattle Seahawks, he's even shorter than Merrill is. And he is a great player along their interior defensive line. And I looked at Forrest Merrill in that same type of mold, and I'm very excited that he was able to play his way into this team.
Jorge, I'm not tired of the Johnson questions. By the way, great sentence.
We just don't know how to answer them any differently than we already have. That's all.
Maybe we need a different take. Absolutely. Tyron Johnson should have absolutely been cut, Jake. Is that what they want to hear? I don't think so.
No, that's not what they want to hear.
Okay, but Jason says they should have kept Tyron Johnson. What do you think, Jake?
Yes, they should have kept Tyron Johnson.
All right, moving on to the edge. Kyler Fackrell, Chris Rumph, Uchenna Nwosu, Joey Bosa are the four that stayed. Anything there that surprised you?
I think maybe just the number of edge rushers that you kept. That's a position where I felt like you could have kept one more player in that type of rotation.
Like a Mickey Boulay?
Yes, exactly. To use that as an example, yes, I do think that was one possibility. Lemonier, who had a couple of good games during the preseason for his pass rushing capabilities. That is another one. So, yeah, them going in with just those four, are those the top four of all the guys that were in there? Absolutely. But I would have expected at least one additional player to come in there and be part of that group. But other than that, nothing surprises me out of that. Sounds about right.
Now, probably one of the strengths of this team is the inside linebacker position. Kenneth Murray, Drew Tranquil, Kaiser White, Nick Neyman, and friend of everyone's, it seems, Amen Ogbongdemiga.
Nicely done. I definitely would have botched that much worse. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Cole Christensen, unfortunately, was cut today. So was Joe Gaziano. So that's the linebacker rotation. And to be honest, it's a damn good linebacker rotation. I love what Amon has brought. I love what Nick Neyman has brought. Nick Neiman is probably one of the highlights of training camp so far in preseason. I think Brandon Staley talks about it today. The dude just knows how to play football. Mm-hmm. You talk about him and who is the other one I talked about? I think it was Fackrell as the two guys that they just know how to play. And so you bring someone like that who is a core special teams guy, like that's a win. So huge. And I think there's a really good balance among these players in the linebacking core. And you saw Amon even being used like as a one, which like nobody saw that coming, but it happened. And so I think this team trusts him a lot. I think he has a huge, very, very, very big motor. And honestly, this linebacking core is something special. We didn't get to see Drew Tranquil last year, but Drew Tranquil, Kaiser White, and Kenneth Murray together as your starting three, like that's going to be a problem for lots of defense.
Yeah, how can you possibly find some type of way to get all three of those guys on the on the field at the same time? That would just be brilliant defensive scheme from Staley and Coach Hill. Nick Neyman. I don't think that we expected him to be this productive for a guy who was taken in the 6th round this year. Like you said, very one of the surprises of preseason thus far. And the guy was just a playmaker. He was. In all 3 preseason games, he just always seemed to be productive around the ball. As you mentioned, Amon did much of the same, but more, I think, for him from a special team standpoint, that's where you're going to see his contributions come in really, really early. and I know was definitely a name to keep an eye on since he was taken as one of the undrafted free agents that were signed by the Chargers in that crop. So I'm very happy for both guys that they have been able to produce so quickly thus far.
I agree with you, Ross. Hopefully, Neyman does not have to cover. That's what Drew Tranquill and Kaiser White, in theory, should be for. I'm hoping that he is rushing the passer along with Kenneth Murray and the other ones. But yes, let's not put him in coverage unless he gets drastically better. If someone says Neyman and Neyman are the future, I wouldn't disagree. I think both those guys have been on the team for a long time because they bring a ton to multiple positions. Let's see what else we got here. Neyman is Tranquill in an emergency. Would you go that far?
I mean, I could understand why someone would say that. I think if you were to take it as Kenneth Murray and Nick Neyman out there for a combination, I still would rather obviously have. Yes, if it's an emergency, I get why you would say that. Because if Neyman can replicate even half of what Tranquill brings, and it seems like he's very capable of doing so, given what we saw from him in the preseason, I think that's a big early statement for a guy who has not played a regular season game yet. But TSK, man, I hope you be right, because that would be some damn good production and a very low drop off if, for whatever reason, Tranquill was not able to play.
Oh, yes, please. Ross Ackerman, I just realized there's a puppy in your picture. I'm a huge dog guy. What's crazy is Kaiser White is the oldest linebacker. Is that true?
I mean, it makes sense. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
That's crazy. And he's only in year 4. Wow.
And he's arguably your fastest of all three of those guys.
That's nuts. That's nuts. So yeah, we could see that for the next 10 years. Someone in here says Tranquill is made of glass. Respectfully disagree. Respectfully.
Yes.
I don't know where that's coming from. The guy had his ankle blown up, essentially. That was horrible. And for what he has gone through, the resiliency he's shown to come back the way he is, the leader he is in his locker room, no, Tranquill is not made of glass. And I would say that guy has more heart than probably anybody else on this team. So I'm just going to say no to that one. We need a better quarterback too. Look, I'll leave this here.
So could 29 other teams. I mean, who doesn't?
If we are ever at the position where we need to rely on our QB2, we have bigger problems. So
yeah,
again,
unfortunately, we're not in the Billy Volek days anymore. No. Not those days.
Nope.
Not Charlie Whitehurst days anymore. No. I mean, yeah, hey, if we ever need to rely on a QB2, it's definitely drastic times for this team if that day ever comes to pass.
Yeah, and again, we're not the Denver Broncos here. We're not the Saints. We're not plenty of other teams who are literally looking. The Dolphins, Julio brings it up. We're not the Dolphins. We're not. I mean, there's a ton of teams that are literally looking for their QB1. And that's where the QB1-2 argument is. Let's chill just a bit. TSK brings up a good point. I remember when Kaiser White was being talked about on the roster bubble last year. It is kind of refreshing.
I mean, in that circumstance, I mean, again, you have to look at how he was being utilized on defense. And we said it a lot during the season last year. I didn't understand why he wasn't being featured more. And now it just seems with Staley and Coach Hill coming in, it's giving him the scheme fit has fit better for him. And there has been a resurgence from him that he has shown in weekly practices and games. And it's very refreshing to see that form of what we saw from him when he was first drafted as a rookie, that nice surprise. So yeah, it's been it's come a long way since those days of thinking that Kaiser White disappeared, and now he is back with a vengeance. It seems like
he is very much back. Jake, I think we have an official request to bring on Forrest Merrill as a special guest on the show. That'd be fun.
I'll pound the table for it. I would love to see it.
I agree. All right, Thunderbolts, we'll do our best. Someone asked the question, speaking of quarterback, if Herbert gets hurt, can we bring in Rivers? What? Okay. Question: if you are Phillip
Oh
Rivers,
my God, Dan, you're really are you really going to come up with a hypothetical scenario right now?
15 seconds. If you're Phillip Rivers, would you want to come back?
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't. It's enticing, sure. If he was sitting at home on a couch with nothing to do, yes, there's a case to be made there. But I think he's just fine being now a high school coach. I think he's just fine.
Okay, Jake, this is a collective prayer request. Here's a prayer to a healthy career for Herbie.
100%. I think we say this every single year. Dear baby Jesus, protect and bubble wrap all of our players for the 2021 NFL season.
Now, last thing on Kaiser White before we get to the DBs here. HH4 basically is saying, we hear this every year about Kaiser White in practice, and then in the regular season, he's gone. Nothing happens. Why do you see this year being different? I could talk about this for hours, but why do you think this year is different for Kaiser White?
Well, I mean, first off, we could start with the consistency that has been there the last couple of years, and that was from a former defensive coordinator. It can pretty much start and end with that, I think. Number two, I don't think that he had some spurts where he wasn't completely healthy. Obviously, his rookie season, I think it was, 8 games before he ended up going down with an injury. There were other spurts over the last 2 years that I know he had. Not long-term injuries that was there, but short ones that kept him out. But for whatever reason, just was not utilized. And for a former coaching regime that really favored veteran players, because remember, we have to remember, just last year, we had a guy by the name of Denzel Perryman that was also part of this linebacking crew as well. So the coaching regime definitely favored the veterans a lot more. That's all I'll say, but mostly I will credit it towards the defensive scheme. As Kaiser White has said on this team, what's the biggest difference that he's seen? It's faster. It's freer. He feels like he's back in a natural position. Something changed for whatever reason from 2018 to 2019 and 2020. I can't put my finger on it other than the common denominator of Derwin James not being out there for those 2 years. But for some reason, when that chess piece was not out there, somebody did not know how to operate this defense properly with the right personnel. And that was the unfortunate downfall, in my opinion.
Yeah. And again, we talked about when he was drafted. We talked about throughout the last few seasons, one of his calling cards is his versatility. Remember, he played safety in college. He's played corner. He's played wide receiver. He's played all kinds of stuff. And Gus Bradley is not a type of scheme that brings versatility to light. He kind of sticks everyone on an island and just you do you. So I think that's going to be the main thing that's different. Very different scheme. Kaiser White could do what he does best. He's unleashed, no pun intended, and is able to actually do his job. Now, one of the guys that I think a lot of folks saw a lot of hype about, unfortunately, was cut. Training camp star John Brandon III from Western Carolina was cut today. So the corners, we can kind of use them as, we'll do corners first. We have Chris Harris, Michael Davis, Asante Samuel Jr., Brennan Faison, Tavon Campbell, and Keemon Hall. Very happy for Keemon Hall. Tavon Campbell, I think, has potential. Brennan Faison, I see folks liking his potential, but he's got to get stuff picked up quickly. I know we're letting him go out there with the ones, letting him kind of get exposed on purpose so we can kind of get his juices going. But even I haven't seen the improvement that everyone is needing from him. So
no.
Would you see this position, corner, being an area where the Chargers could look to the wire to bring in some reinforcements?
It's possible, because one name that you didn't mention in there, Dan, was Ryan Smith, who I know was a key special teamer that the Chargers had signed during free agency. Unfortunately, we haven't seen a lot of him during training camp and preseason because he's been dealing with an injury. And even Gilbert Manzano reported earlier today that Brandon Staley had announced that Ryan Smith is a possibility to go on IR. So if he does return, one of those 7 that you had just announced will probably end up getting replaced by Ryan Smith when and if he ends up coming back. So this is another situation that's fluid, but Ryan Smith was looked at by a lot prior to his injury that this could be the guy who could be our gunner for special teams. So I definitely think, right, that's exactly what he was brought here for. So I think that that's going to carry a lot of weight moving forward. If he's able to come back, I think you have to look immediately at Kaman Hall and Tavon Campbell being the odd guys out if Ryan Smith is able to come back and replace them. But in general, 7 defensive backs, specifically at the corner spot, I was a little bit surprised that there were that many that were kept on the roster. Again, another situation. Could I have seen Tyron Johnson being kept over at Kaman Hall or at Tavon Campbell? Yes, I could. So this was another one that, as far as maybe this puts into perspective, Dan, your depth at the position. Yes, I know you got your starters in Michael Davis, Chris Harris, and Asante Samuel Jr., but beyond that, this may be showing your hand as far as your confidence in your corner depth that you actually have. So if it was me and there was a good corner that came on the market, yeah, I wouldn't I wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger on it.
I wouldn't either. And Ross brings up a good point. We haven't talked about safeties yet, but Derwin James, Chris Harris, I think Nazir Adderley as well. We've seen Asante Samuel Jr. do this. There's kind of a positionless group at times. And so being able to see Chris Harris play safety as well as in the slot outside at man, like, we're going to see a lot of fun things this year that we have not seen even in practice. Like, for folks that have not gone to training camp, even in training camp, it was hard to kind of follow what this scheme was doing. Folks were flying around everywhere. And that wasn't even with everybody playing. So someone brought up something, and it's really important, Jake. If I saw a 3-toed sloth, there's no way in hell I could tackle it. Do you think Faison could tackle a 3-toed sloth? Like, that just doesn't seem very nice. It's not kind. Like, they're so cute.
The creativity in the chat room right now is fantastic. It's fantastic. That's all I'm going to say about it.
If you had to tackle a 3-toed sloth, would you do it? Or like,
why would I want to? That's the point. It just seems like an unfair thing to do, but I get where TSK is going with this. I get it.
Imagine the sloth just looking up like, yo. Jeez. Wow. We're approaching this part of the segment, guys. All right. Moving on. Last spot to talk about. Actually, no, we have 2 more. Defensive backs. We talk about the corners, well, the safeties now. Nazir Adderley, Mark Webb, Alohi Gilman, obviously the one and only Derwin James are staying. And we did have to get rid of one. Ben, should I call him Lakuta one more time?
Make sure.
Ben Lakuta. No, Ben DeLuca out of Charlotte, unfortunately, was cut today. Who, honestly, I could see him getting picked up. I think he brings a bit of versatility that a lot of teams could use. But other than that, I don't think there's any surprises to me with these 4. Was there a surprise for you?
No, there wasn't. This is, when you talked about Ben's, if you go back and you look at his accolades that he did throughout college, it reads like a damn, award ceremony. I mean, it's insane. So, yeah, I definitely think that he's a guy who could get picked up by another team. But when you look at these core 4, I mean, this is what we expected to make the final roster. Again, I didn't expect 7 corners to make the team, but I definitely thought that these were, if it came down to tough cuts, that this was an easy position to pick out behind Derwin James, Nasir Adderley, you keep Alohi Gilman, and obviously the way that Mark Webb has performed during preseason. This makes sense. So, no, not a lot of surprises here at all.
No, Ross, yes, I agree with you. Mark Webb is a steal. The fact that we got this guy in the 7th round, he is going to put some big roles into this team. He's going to play some big minutes, big plays. I cannot believe how much this guy is bringing to this team already. He flashes. When you see him out there, he flashes. And for a 7th round pick, like, that's literally all you could ask for. So, Jake, Couple random questions or comments that we can get through here before we close out. If you guys have questions, feel free to reach out to us now. This is the time. We're going to get to our live Q&A, answer a couple questions maybe for the next 5-10 minutes, then we'll wrap up. Ty Long is staying. We now have a new long snapper as well. Matt Overton is our guy. Couple questions. Let's go into this. This will be fun. So rapid fire, we'll go into some of these questions. If you have them, leave them in the comments section. We'll get to as many as we can. One comment that was left here a bit ago, Jake, was that Joe Lombardi's in over his head. Now, there's a lot there.
I mean, based off of what? If we're still going back to his Detroit coaching time, the guy hasn't even performed with this offense yet. Give it time to breathe. I mean, we all wanted to put blame on Anthony Lynn and Shane Steichen last year, but that was proven. We understood why those comments were said. We understood why those valued reasons why, it was time for them to go a different direction. Let's just see what Lombardi's going to do. I'm excited to see what Joe Lombardi is going to implement, specifically with.
Oh, Jake might be a little frozen now. Let's see if he comes back. While we're waiting on Jake, Blue Deftone. Let's see if we can get those for you. With T-Billy gone, do you guys think that Mike Williams will get a contract extension after this year, depending on how good he plays? In short, I don't think that he is going to. Because, unfortunately, I think the Chargers are either going to keep him this year, and he's going to ball out, and he's going to be far outpriced that what we can afford. Jake, welcome back, sir. Or he is going to not be good, and the Chargers aren't going to keep him. But, Jake, the question was, do we think Mike Williams is going to get a contract extension? I think either way, I don't see him returning. Especially with Josh Allen. Do you agree?
I don't think that T-Billy not being on this team anymore has any aspect to a Mike Williams contract situation. I think it's Josh Palmer that was the warning shot, much like Kenneth Murray was when he was drafted last year for Denzel Perryman. That was the warning shot. I think Josh Palmer is the warning shot to Mike Williams that is going to carry the most weight on if or not Mike Williams ends up getting a contract extension. I don't think it has anything to do with Tyron Johnson.
I would agree. Safety is definitely the weak link on this team. I disagree. Gonna leave it there. Any position that has Derwin James on it is not going to be a weak link.
If you're talking about safety depth, Dan, I've talked about this. I felt that this is a position that could still use some veteran strength. So safety depth, I'll go as far as to say that, but saying that safety is definitely the weak link of this team?
Hell no.
No, sir. No.
Nope. Do you think, Jason Landon has a question, do you think we go after an offensive lineman in free agency or in this waiver wire period?
I mean,
Yes.
Look, if you're looking for a backup specific right tackle position, then absolutely it makes sense to do that. We talked about one specifically earlier that the Chargers could go after that makes a lot of sense given his history with Justin Herbert. But who knows what's going to happen? All that we know right now is this is not the final 53, and you have the remainder of this week in order to do any of these waiver wire transactions. So we'll see what comes to pass. If I was to put my money on it, I would say that there are 2 roster spots that the Chargers will make some kind of change to. Do I know which ones they are? No. But that's what I would put my money on.
I think there are 3. And I think the 3 are wide receiver, corner, and I just had a mind blank. Offensive line. Those are 3. We might get offensive tackle. I can see a corner. And then potentially wide receiver. Let's see. HH4 flashes against second and third teamers. I believe this one came in when we were talking about Mark Webb. Not true. Mark Webb has balled out against 1, 2s, and 3s. Mark Webb, you will see shine this year. Y'all are sleeping on Mark Webb, I promise you. Ross has a question. How do you feel about the edge distinction? I feel like a hybrid offensive line, outside linebacker, and defensive end. Is this a new position in the NFL? It's not a new position in the NFL per se, but it's definitely a new position on a Staley scheme. You hear a lot of people talk about like an edge player, like Von Miller was an outside linebacker, turned into edge, especially with 3-4 scheme. I don't think it's necessarily a new position. I think it's just depending on how people are used. Would you agree, Jake?
Yes, this is exactly right. I mean, when we first brought in Joey Bosa, it was taking him from his Ohio State scheme as a defensive end and putting him in an offensive outside linebacker scheme. And then quickly, when we brought in Gus Bradley to switch over, it became him in that 4-3 scheme more that he was more used to in a defensive end type of position. So I think that when you have these guys, and again, even the way that Brandon Staley had talked about this a lot during his introductory press conference was that there's going to be a lot of hybrid 3-4, 4-3 coverages, especially when you have Derwin James, who can essentially be put all over the field. You're going to have a lot of different looks to this team. So I totally understand the edge distinction question, because you look at guys, whether they're picked up free agency or the draft, which one's a better fit for the scheme. I think with what Staley wants to implement, again, much like we've heard him say a lot of times, you were saying it earlier with Chris Harris and Derwin James's type of aspect, Dan, positionless. If he can make his guys positionless type players to make them fit any scheme, that's what's going to benefit this team in the long run.
We are wrapping up with instant reactions on the 53-man roster trimmed down. Guys, this has been a ton of fun. If you're not already subscribed on YouTube, please subscribe to us on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up. A like, however it works. Turn on those bell notifications, subscribe on podcasts, whatever. If you want to see more of Jake's face when he freezes during internet connection outages, feel free to subscribe so you can see that.
Yeah, I didn't even get a chance to see what my face looked like. It was just a black screen, PS. So I hope that I was making a face that made everybody laugh, and it looks like I did.
It was so good that I actually ended up moving your face off screen until you came back.
Wow.
You're welcome.
It was that bad, huh?
Thunderbolts 24. Thank you so much. This is my favorite podcast as well. Jake, is this your favorite podcast?
No, it's not.
On that note.
Kidding.
Thunderbolts 24. Thank you so much. All right, we got a question here. TSK asks, who is your favorite potential post-cut free agent signing?
You know, none of these names are going to blow the socks off of anybody, because when you start looking at this, you're talking about, more depth type of position players. Obviously, Tyrell Crosby is one that makes a lot of sense for this team to go out and acquire. When you look at the whole wide receiver position, I still think that that's one that the Chargers will add and make a group of 6 rather than 5. I was looking through the list this afternoon. Isaiah Hodgins, who I was really high on in last year's draft, saw that he was cut by the Buffalo Bills. Wouldn't mind to see what he's got. Who is the other one that we had? Kiki Kuti. I also saw that he was cut by Houston if you wanted to bring more of that speed aspect in there. Those are just a few. But again, nothing that's going to blow the socks off of anybody here at these early points. Right now, unfortunately, do I see Tyron Johnson as a depth player? No, I see him as a valuable starter. But now that he is off this roster and who is available from the rest of these cuts, that's probably what you're going to have to start with pretty early. But those are just a few names to throw out.
Yeah, and for the record, TSK, director's good as well. Shout out, friend of the show, the director. I think we have a collaboration scheduled to go with him soon at some point here, Jake. Love the director. The guy is amazing. If you have not checked out his stuff, please check him out. The director on YouTube. Great dude. Ross gives a paraphrase here, Jake. I think this is about T-Billy. Yep. Basically what he's saying is, I don't know if did you finally get a chance to watch All In, Jake?
I did, yes.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Essentially what Ross is saying is in that there's a moment where he talks about people's character in that, where essentially like if you're not a good person, you're gonna get exposed. And Ross is wondering if maybe there's something there with Tyron Johnson, T-Billy, or I mean, given that somebody took his job because of character issues. Again, we don't know. All this is speculation. It's kind of a stretch, but do you see that being?
I mean, this is right as of right now. I mean, again, people are trying to connect dots as far as what happened, and if we're trying to make sense at any of this, again, it doesn't make sense. Period. But if we're trying to grasp at any type of straws that we have, and we want to hang it on, that it was a attitude issue, whatever it is, if that's the only straw that we can really grasp, which again to me is, I'm surprised that this would just be coming out now. If this was truly the problem, again, to me, I still think that there's something that's underlying that we just don't know about. But even I can't figure it out. Am I pissed about it? Sure, I'm pissed about it. I've expressed my feelings. I've drank my whiskey to that. I still don't understand it. I did not. I should have about 5 minutes ago, but I didn't. But, I understand if this is the only straw that we have to grasp out of this because we're all frustrated, make it make sense. If this is the way we're trying to make it make sense, and this is the only thing that we can look to, then it has to be something that we were not aware of, Dan.
No. TSK, you're very welcome. This has been super fun. We love doing this. We'll definitely do this again, obviously. HH4 gets snarky and says, Crosby, offensive tackle, was an injury waiver. Do your homework, bro. Actually, do your homework. It was a very minor injury. The guy's just fine. Let's chill here. It's just 7:00 on the Pacific time. We're all going to be fine.
Yeah, man.
Jeez. All right, Jake, I think that's going to wrap things up for us. Anything else you want to tell the great people that have continued to support us and listen and watch and subscribe?
Look, what everybody has done to help this podcast grow over the last several months has been nothing but astonishing. We are finally here. We're now, we're so close to the regular season. It's finally here. We got out of the purgatory. We went through training camp. We went through preseason. It was a blast. We're finally here. I'm just ready to start talking about real regular season games with all of you. Can't wait for it. So let's get to work.
Yep. And look, we've been on here so long today that Jake's room has gone from bright and shiny to now dark behind him. And look, you guys are all worth it. As Jake said, could not have done this or cannot do this without all of you. There are so many people that we can thank, but we don't have enough time to thank everyone. So we will just say thank you all for what you are doing and continue to do to support the show. For Jake Hefner, you can find his lack of beard now at Jake T. Hefner on Twitter.
Still can't believe
you can find myself at Chargers Homer on Twitter. You can find us at LAC_Unleashed. Find us on YouTube, on Instagram, on Twitter. Give us a like, give us a follow, give us a retweet, whatever it is. Let us know what you guys think of the show. We love feedback, love interacting with you guys. We'll do it again soon. And that's going to do it for now on Chargers Unleashed. We can't wait to talk to you guys soon. Have a great rest of the week. And let's cross fingers for an amazing next couple days with this wire. Let's have some fun, guys. Stay happy, stay safe, and have a great rest of the evening. See you later, guys. Bolt up.